We're talking about climbing mountains, which I don't have a lot of experience in beyond just like hiking a little bit here in California, which is not like climbing a mountain at all. Kayla, you know more about climbing mountains from your dad.
Right.
Not stud of a father.
My dad, he is a stud. I mean, I was 4 years old when my dad summited the Matterhorn, not the ride at Disneyland, but the real mountain in Switzerland. My sister was 3. My mom was 8 months pregnant with my brother. This was not the first mountain he had climbed. He had done Kilimanjaro, Denali, a ton of huge mountains. And he had a near-death experience as he was climbing. He fell and was sliding down the mountain, and there was one last overhang, and he had the crampons on his boots, which are the little spikes, and he had one last chance, and he jammed his ice axe into the side of the mountain, cramped on to the edge. And he said, as he's falling and sliding, all of his kids are going through his mind, his wife, everything that's at stake. And he survives. And so that was the last time he climbed. And K2 was next, then Everest on his list. And he decided to let the group go without him. On that specific climb, they did end up losing one of their team members. So he decided that's when I'm going to not do this anymore. And it's funny because you talk about mountaineering and mountain climbing, and everyone thinks, wow, what a great feat. But I think sometimes we don't really know how difficult it is and how easily people lose their lives doing this. And that's why I'm so excited to talk to our guest today, Vanessa O'Brien.
Would you ever want to, like, was this ever anything then when your dad finally shared, like told you, his kids, about this climbing experiences? Was he ever like, honey, we got to go do Kilimanjaro one day, or no?
No, I never wanted to do it because of his experiences. I think I heard firsthand how intense they were. And I never felt the urge to do this. I respect him so much. But, you know, growing up as a family, we would just go out to Joshua Tree and carabine each other onto this rope and just climb as a family. Wow. And then rappel back down the cliffs. This was something we did all the time growing up. So even at a young age. So this was something that I grew up doing. I mean, you know, it's like a 2,000 foot thing, not 18,000 feet or whatever. So it's not like we're not actually summiting big mountains, but it was a part of my life. But now, yeah.
That's so interesting. My mom had a diving accident when she was, when I was a little kid. And she ended up, I remember when my parents got their scuba license because they had been training in the pool and like getting all ready for this big trip they were going on. And my mom ended up getting a faulty oxygen tank. And so when she was at the bottom, and I don't know like how far down she was, but essentially when she inhaled, it was only water. And so she had to rush up, which you're not supposed to do, is like rush up. And she ruptured her ears, or I just remember at a young age, it was obviously something with her ears, and just the pain that she was in for so long after that. And she didn't want to dive anymore after that because, I mean, of that like terrifying incident. And so as an adult, I have zero interest in diving. Like I don't need to go down to the depths. I don't need to hang out with the fish and like swim with a shark. Like I don't need to do it. I'll snorkel on top and just wave to you all down below, which is why I think it's so interesting to talk with anyone who has, you know, even just hearing about your dad who's climbed all these, you know, incredible feats of mountains, and then to even be talking with our guest today who has been to the depths of our oceans. I find it so, you know, the idea of even wanting to do those things is so interesting to me. I love that your dad has done this. Like, he's already like I feel like every time I hear about your dad, he's like some character in a novel that I just want to be like, and then what did he do? He was like this like stud of a like actor, commercial actor in LA, you know, like Mr. California Dreamin', and like now is also like climbed all these mountains. I love your dad.
He's
I have a crush on him, if you can't tell.
My dad is definitely one of my heroes for sure. I've learned so much from him in life. And you guys, we have so much to learn from our hero that we're talking to today. We are sitting down with Vanessa O'Brien. She is a British and American mountaineer, explorer, aquanaut author, former business executive. She's climbed to the highest peak on every continent and has a Guinness World Record for doing so in 295 days, setting a record for the fastest time a woman has ever achieved this goal. She also became the first woman to reach Earth's highest and lowest points, receiving a Guinness World Record for that. She became the first American woman to climb K2 and the first British woman to climb K2, result of her dual nationality.
Vanessa O'Brien has also skied the last 60 nautical miles of the South Pole and North Pole, completing the Explorer's Grand Slam in 11 months, becoming the first woman to do so in under a calendar year. And she's the 8th woman in the world to accomplish this. She also has a new book titled To the Greatest Heights, Facing Danger, Finding Humility, and Climbing a Mountain of Truth, available everywhere now. Without further ado, here is our conversation with Vanessa O'Brien.
Directionally Challenged. Vanessa O'Brien, we are so excited to be with you today. I mean, what a fascinating life that you have. To be the first and only woman to have reached the planet's highest peak and lowest depth. But in order to get the full picture, we really want to start at the beginning of your professional career. You had an incredibly successful banking job, then the recession hits and you end up losing it. Now, instead of letting this define you, you decide there's more to life than climbing the corporate ladder, and you decide, I'm going to climb Mount Everest instead. We always discuss on this podcast pivotal life moments, and this is definitely one of them. So, I mean, this is the stuff you read about in books and daydream about. So talk to us. What made you make this pivotal life decision to completely transform the trajectory of your life?
Yeah, it's a great question. And really, it's one of the reasons to write the book. And one of the reasons even to read books. It's you look for these like gems. And when they happen to you, it's one of the things you want to share. You don't always need a catalyst, but catalysts help because they push you into different directions. Hong Kong, I was in Hong Kong at the time, and Hong Kong was a wonderful place to be because it was foreign. And I don't mean that to be sort of laughing foreign, but, English wasn't the first language. It was Cantonese, not even Mandarin. But there were some things that were familiar. So the Chinese work ethic was very much like what I would call like Bonfire of the Vanities 80s. For example, the Chinese really liked to work hard, and they valued success, and they valued money, and they were willing to work long hours to get those things. So they didn't want it to come to them free and handed on a platter. They were willing to work really hard for those things, but that's what they valued. And that would have been great if I too was working, but I wasn't working for the first time. And so here I was in this, interesting place when the recession hit. And I found myself sort of for the first time, I say for the first time, not working. And that's sort of true. From the age of 15, I always had at least a babysitting job or, running newspapers or doing something, right? So for the first time, here I was in Hong Kong without a job. And here all these people value jobs so much. And there was sort of an existential crisis. And it made me realize like a type A person can't really do nothing. And that's when I really start thinking, what am I going to do? I can't sit at home. So there's a couple of things that come together at this moment. And for people who have been in this situation, it's interesting. You really need to take stock of all these things that happen to you. So the first thing is that I can't find my tribe. And this is really important because there's lots of different people, but I'm not fitting in perfectly because I don't have children, and there's a lot of expats. So there's a lot of, Westerners who with stay-at-home moms who look after the children. But the problem with somebody who worked, their way up a corporate ladder is if you try to befriend a mom, their attention spans aren't there because they're always like busy yelling at the children while they're talking to you. And that's really annoying.
It's so true.
It's annoying for the moms too. We recognize it too.
Oh, correct. I'm really both parties suffer. Absolutely.
Right.
But you can only have so many of those where it does your head in. You're like, oh, if they're going to constantly yell at like little Sue or little Bobby or whatever, it's like, right.
Uh-huh.
And then there were like the ladies who would go play tennis, say, and then go finish off a bottle of wine, like at lunch. And I thought, wow, well, that's interesting, but that's like a slippery slope. Like I could just see like alcoholism, like piling up. And I was like, oh, I don't really want to do that either. So there was that. And then, the women who work, the problem with Hong Kong is it's such a, it serves so many territories that they would get on a plane and kind of go away for 2 weeks, hitting all these different markets, and they wouldn't come back, and you'd sort of forget, wait, when was the last time we talked? And trying to make times to get together or whatever would be very hard to do that with the women who worked. So it was just an interesting place. So one is the can't find the tribe, which is feeding into this what am I going to do? And then the next thing is taking stock of, okay, what are you good at, and what do you need to feel like a sense of purpose or a goal? And that's when I started making lists. And the lists were really interesting because I knew I needed to do something. And the first things on your list are not going to always be the right things. So my first thing was like, okay, well, maybe I should cure malaria. And that's why in the book, people are like, well, that might be noble, but really isn't that better left to like Bill Gates? It's like, yeah, actually, it probably is. I probably can't really do that in 2 to 3 years and really find my piece of that puzzle. What is little old me going to do for that? Or if let's say, like I'm in Asia now, there's antioxidants in some, exotic fruits. Maybe I could do like a fantastic, facial cream or moisturizer or something like that, discover something like that. But then there's product packaging, there's shelf life, and there's all these like, things that I would have to, find out about. So everything came across like some barrier to market. And that's when somebody just said Everest, and it was like the penny dropped, it ricocheted off the floor and it bounced. And I thought, oh my God, Everest, Everest, Everest. And it kept echoing in my head. And I was like, where is it? How high is it? It was vaguely familiar. Like, yes, of course, in 1953, Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay did this, but it was being done today as well. What I didn't know was whether I could do it and whether I would be any good at it or even like it. And I think that was the difference, was I didn't say, oh, no, I can't. I said, climbing is a skill and therefore it could be learned and taught. And that's, I think, where the difference probably was coming from a business background, was I didn't shy away because I saw it as a skill.
Well, right. And you talk about saying, no, I can't. And that really came into play because you didn't summit the mountain until your third attempt, right? The first time you made it to 18,000 feet, and then due to altitude sickness had to go back down. Second time you made it further. Third time, you kept having to say to yourself, I can do this. Talk to us about what that's like and the perseverance of that, because if I'm taking this experience personally, I think, well, I made it 18,000 feet. That's great. I'm good. Now I can just say I somewhat climbed Mount Everest, but no, you had to make it to the top. What is that experience like?
So yeah, there's 2 tries on Everest and 3 on K2, the second highest. Now, so what happened initially it was just Everest. That's all I wanted was Everest. And I'd never thought of climbing anything else. Because I thought, look, the economy is just in a tailspin. If I find something to do for 2 to 3 years, I'll sort myself out and go back to work. Huh. So really, I was looking for something. Wrongly, I was looking for a goal, and later I realized 2 things were wrong. One was the goal was not the summit. That's like you realize that you have to get down. So the goal is really round trip, right? Because 85% of deaths happen on descent. So, you have to get down. But really, a goal is great, but it's what comes after that. And that's why I think a lot of people who maybe have success early in Silicon Valley, or if you've ever seen people have really early success early in their life, they sort of freak out because it's like, what do I do now? Mm-hmm. I've been successful. And there's like PTSD around that. And they don't really ever find a sense of purpose, which I like better than a goal because it's more of a continuum and a longer line. And it takes a little bit longer to figure out what a sense of purpose is rather than a goal, which is like, okay, great, from A to B, conquered, done, check mark.
Right.
Yeah.
A sense of purpose is more complicated.
It's easy for your sense of identity to get wrapped up in this idea of accomplishing this one goal in your life. And when you can realize, oh, that's not your identity, that's just something that you're doing. And exactly like the heart of the purpose. May I ask how old you were when you decided to take on Everest?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I stood at the top of Everest, I want to say at the age of 46 or 7, something like that. And one of the recent quotes that came past me was from a writer who said she defied age, trauma, basically she had 3 things and she was like, none of it mattered. And what I like about it is, you don't have to wear that stuff if it doesn't work for you. In other words, besides the cliche of, 30 is the new 20, 40 is the new 30, 50 is the new 40, right? Everybody goes back 10. The reality is people had always climbed the 8,000 meter peaks or 26,000 feet when they were older, simply because it took 6 to 8 weeks to summit. And the only people who could really afford to do that were people who could take time off. And if you think about that, a job isn't really going to give you 2 months off in a normal pre-COVID, sort of environment where you were working. And, it's like, what do you get? 2 weeks off, a month off with tenure? Nobody could just say, hey, see ya. So people were generally older when they did this anyway. But what I really liked recently is I saw some of my early relatives who came through Ellis Island, and the first gentleman who came was 45 years old. And I thought, wow, here's the earliest explorer who comes from Austria-Hungary, right? No longer exists. And he's come over at 45 to start. And here, that would have seemed old. 45 would have seemed old because he was a manual laborer in coal mines. But here at 47, two generations later, somebody's at the top of Everest. And I love that because it really shows how generations have changed, not only in education demands, but also just in their capability to take exploration in a little different direction.
Right. We, when your PR team first reached out, Candice and I were so excited because we find this idea of exploration, the modern day explorer, so fascinating. Can you take us through what a day in the life is on the mountain, whether it's K2, Everest, any of the mountains, because this is so foreign for most of us and most of our listeners. What is a normal day like? How much does your pack weigh that you're carrying on your back? What's inside it? Because I imagine there's a weight limit. And also, I'm fascinated to know about the food regimen because that seems like a conundrum, having to rely on food for energy, but only be able to fit so much in your pack.
Yeah.
Lay it on us.
No, absolutely. Okay, so let's do 2 typical days. Let's do a day when because there's a lot of downtime because of weather. So much. The reason it's 6 to 8 weeks is because you need to acclimatize to climb high, sleep low, climb high, sleep low, climb high, sleep low, in an ascending way, because your body builds red blood cells, which carry more oxygen. So this into thin air Krakauer, nomenclature is simply saying that where oxygen is perceived to be at a deficit, your body is compensating for it by changing its chemistry, its biochemistry, by having more oxygen-rich cells. But it does it naturally. So now a boring day where your weather reasons ground you at base camp, you could have it's like either chores, and chores are like laundry. Right. So laundry builds up because, let's face it, you're wearing something every day. Right.
And I imagine you're really sweaty.
You do
and
sweat.
Smelly.
Yeah. Even though it's cold and you are sleeping outside, there's no heat or anything like that. The reality is that if you sweat, at least your base layer is going to get it. Maybe your top layers are okay. But, you certainly you're under base layers have to be washed. And so it accumulates more than you think it does, right? Even a week at home, you're like, what is this bag, right? How did it get here?
So how do you complete normal domestic chores on a mountain, 18,000 feet up?
So you hope that your cook is still in your fine graces, because what he'll do is he'll add some hot water to the freezing cold stream water and make it feasible for your hands to get in there. And then you have like either there's bars of soap that act like laundry, or there's you don't really want to take detergent that's from here because it's too bulky. But there's bars of soap that act as laundry; those are usually the best. Or there's some concentrates that you can put in. But you have to, like the old days in a way when they used to run it through those old wheels and stuff. But you have to kind of get in there and move it around and let it soak a little bit, and then make sure all the suds are out. And that's like a chore day. If it were a fun day, you might get the rest of the crew together and see, you don't go for walks or stuff because that's work.
Yeah.
So it's not like, hey, let's go for a walk. Everybody'd be like, no way. But you might have a movie night. You might play cards. You might play, there's lots of games,
How do you have a movie night? What is that?
So,
there's not Wi-Fi, right?
There is Wi-Fi, but what happens is we're not streaming the films. The films are downloaded on PC, like laptops, or they're downloaded on iPads. And so we either just show them on the iPad, everybody gathered around.
All 12 of you huddled around a tiny iPad.
Actually, that's the easiest. Occasionally, there's tiny, tiny little things that will project, but that does take up more power. And so you need like generators or solar power or backup stored battery to use that. Solar's okay, but there's a lot of cloudy days. So there's plenty of film nights. You could have a film night almost every night.
So when you say downtime, is this 2 weeks of downtime as your body's acclimating? Is it a few days?
So it is, it's dispersed throughout the 6 weeks, and usually it's weather related because you wouldn't choose to do nothing. You would do it only if it was part of an acclimatization, like you just got down and you're giving yourself another day or two to recuperate, or weather comes in and weather can come in and trap you for a week. And those are the worst, because psychologically what happens is if weather traps you for a week and say you're 3/5 of the way in, people will start to get really discouraged. And they'll say, they'll see avalanches come down, or they'll look at the weather reports and they all look really, really bad. And people will start to psychologically check out. And once they start doing that, they can even make themselves sick, interestingly enough. Mm-hmm. And once that starts happening, you start to lose people. And I mean, mentally lose them, because if you're not really there and you don't really want it, you can't possibly put yourself through the amount of work that you have to do going forward.
Well, it sounds like you've obviously not only done the amount of work in order to move forward on that initial climb of Everest, but that was what started it all. I mean, you would go on to climb many a mountain. After you accomplished Everest, what then made you go, oh, no, this is, I have to keep doing this? As opposed to like, okay, I did it. I've climbed Everest. I'm good, guys. Now it's time to get back into the banking world and get into a normal day-to-day life. When did you go, oh, no, I have to continue this new path?
So Everest was interesting for me because I thought, the goal was just Everest. So that should have been it. But there was initial failure, and Everest was, I think what, if I look at it holistically, I think I went into Everest thinking, okay, I've had a lot of success in business. I've worked for, these great companies. If I have the technical stuff down, what's the big deal? But the real crux is, I think in business, you are taught to always be in control. And the problem is, in nature, you can never always be in control. And it's a beautiful thing, because I almost feel like everybody needs to have this experience. It wasn't even my book that really brought it out. It was another book that talked about my experience, but just where my ego just kind of cracks open. And it's like, all the sort of principles that I had learned in the past were just, they just didn't apply. I had to retrain, retool, rethink, read everything to survive in nature. But initially I wasn't listening, and I was just kind of doing it. And it wasn't until it was like failing that I just turned around and I listened, and it was like a film playing backwards, and I could see myself making all the mistakes. And I was like, wow, that's what it's all about.
So is this the moment that you go from having a goal to then feeling like, oh, this is more of a purpose? Is that moment for you?
It opens the door for a bigger understanding. It was like the mountain was teaching me patience, and it was teaching me to focus on what I could control versus what I could not control. And they were so important. But in the beginning, I was too sort of narrow-minded to be open to that feedback. And later on, when I was listening or more intuitively sensing all this information coming back, I was like, wow, this is so intense. Why didn't I see this before? And it made me a much better climber. If I hadn't had the initial failures, especially with Everest, I don't think I would have been as good of a mountaineer later, because I would never have picked up on these sort of I don't know, I'll call them physical, mental, spiritual, all these other aspects of it that I think all fit together that made it work.
I definitely want to get into the life lessons and the parallels about what you learn climbing a mountain and what we learn just climbing in the journey of life, as we like to call it. But just for our listeners, because I really want them to get the full scope of what you would go on to accomplish as a climber and an explorer. Can you explain to our listeners what the Grand Slam is? Because that is such a cool accomplishment to me.
It's the highest peak on every continent. And there are 2 lists, unfortunately. So I would say there's 7 continents and therefore 7 peaks. But 2 mountaineers disagreed on Australasia, Oceania. So Messner chose the only rock climbing in the 7 summits. Dick Bass, who did the original 7 summits, chose Australia. So there's actually 8 7 summits. So that just complicates things, but you can't really say the highest peak on every continent, because some people think there's 7, there's really 8. Then there's the North and South Pole if you do the Explorers Grand Slam versus the 7 summits. So you could do the 7 summits and just stick with the highest peak on every continent, or you could do the Explorers Grand Slam and add the North and South Poles. And so that's what I did. Starting with Everest. Now, so I guess I started with Everest because for me, that's the only thing that I wanted initially. And I failed the first time because I had been to Kilimanjaro, and Kilimanjaro I did just for, fun, like a normal holiday. And
just for fun, normal holiday. Let's climb Mount Kilimanjaro.
I wanted to do that. And my husband was like, that's a serious climb. I was like, well, I hike Fryman in California, and so I think that's a serious climb. Like, I know you're saying it's like casually on holiday, but you obviously like fit and prepared and ready to take on Kilimanjaro.
So people tend to start with Kilimanjaro. I'll tell you, 50% of the park statistics in Kilimanjaro are failure, because people think it's so easy and it's just a walk, and it's the only one of the 7 summits that doesn't require any kit, like, helmets or a belt or crampons or anything like that, a harness. So because of that, people think, oh, I can just do it. And they don't really give it the attention it deserves, especially around acclimatization. The point is, it's just under 20,000 feet. It's high. If they don't give it the full week of, climb high, sleep low, climb high, sleep low of the acclimatization. And so people tend to get the acute mountain sickness. So it could be anything from dizziness and headaches and, low energy. Sometimes they'll get diarrhea and some of the other things. So it can be a tough mountain for sure. But the fact is, it's that high, which is higher than Everest Base Camp. So Everest Base Camp is also a trek. And that made it difficult for me after I learned how to climb with technical climbing stuff, because the way they sold Everest was Base Camp, Camp 2, or the summit. So if I only wanted Everest, I had already been higher than base camp. I was not yet ready for the summit. That's why I chose Camp 2. And that's when I realized, like, whoa, Camp 2, even though I had been higher, I was so outside of my zone, even for the small amount, this 2,000 more feet or whatever, because that was the Kumbu Ice Fall. One of the most dangerous places is right out of base camp with the shifting, three-dimensional towering ice rocks and everything else. And so I ended up in sort of an ice fall avalanche on my first try up to Camp 2. And that was part of my failure. So, and in an ice fall, there's very little things you can do to save yourself. Like most will say, self-arrest, which is where you take your ice axe and throw it into, the mountain and sort of, get into a position to start to prepare for anything that comes over you, like ice and snow. But in an ice fall, you can't, because this is where all the ladders lie horizontal, big towering buildings, wide crevasses. It's just hazards everywhere. So anyway, that was an interesting experience. But what I did do after that failure was really eat a huge amount of humble pie, learn about what I did wrong, and then from there immediately start training to do Everest properly, which was to go to other peaks over 26,000 feet, 2 of them back to back. So by the time I came back to Everest, I was probably the one on the team who had the most experience with high altitude, which is great. And then 7 summits happened, actually. I didn't decide on that until I literally summited Everest. And I realized, look, the economy is not really back. 2 of my people on Everest were going right to Denali. And then all the trips were booked, and I sort of panicked because how was I going to get to Denali? And I called up the guy that somebody referred me to, and he was like, "No, come on, we'll take you."
Wow.
Like, oh, all right. Game on.
Game on. Yeah.
I don't even think I had time to one more wash of clothes, right?
But I think that's how sometimes the best moments in life are made. It's like, okay, no, I'm good. Like it's the opportunity is presenting itself. I'm going to lean in. And, it is kind of in reference to what you were talking about earlier, like letting go of the ego and, and listening to the environment around you as opposed to trying to control everything happening in your life. And so obviously, you listened, you heard a calling, you were open to this. You learned from. You keep repeating this kind of climbing terminology that I've not heard before, but I think is like something I'm going to hold on to. Climb high, sleep low. I refer to it sometimes. It sounds like a 10 steps forward, 8 steps back, but that's actually positive. That's how you continue to move forward. It's not just a climb. You have to be. If we've learned anything on this podcast, you have to learn from your failures. That's actually your growing period. That's in this resting period. That's how I think what I'm going to take from this conversation, this beautiful sleep low, this rest period, so you can be prepared for the next part of the climb, which you would go on to continue climbing and climbing and climbing, and then diving to the depths and the farthest, most bottom part of the world, which is a whole other thing to take on. And my only reference is watching Titanic when Rose goes with the crew to find the Titanic. And that's enough to freak me out. What is the mindset to be, and what is it called? The little sea mobile that you are in. And you are traveling 4 hours down below into the water. What inspired you to then take on that adventure?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me say one thing, because you touched on failure. What the mountains taught me, and this was more on K2, because it took me three consecutive years to summit the second highest mountain in the world, and all the other mountains I was able to do, except that very first time with Everest, the first time, right? So, however many there are, let's call it, 12, 13, 14 mountains. I did them all once, got to the summit. There's always, kind of success, except that very first time on Everest, and then the very last mountain, right? K2 took me 3 consecutive years. I started to realize that failure is an interesting word, because it's one that we put on ourselves, and it's sometimes labels that other people give to us, especially with social media. And then what I started to look at was failure is very important in some situations. Nature can be one of them because failure gives you data points. Like, so we're climbing mountains. We go camp 1, 2, 3, 4, and then summit. But no matter what you do, you're always gathering information. So even if you fail one year, you have gathered a lot of information. Going back a second year, again, you gather a lot of information. What I started to realize is that you don't really fail unless you give up. And the reason I love that is because nobody really ever says it in those terms. They just say, oh, I failed. And then they assume that they're out. But if they looked at failure as just a data point, instead of a continuum where it's like, nope, I'm never out until I say I'm out. That would be a different mindset. And I think it would make people stronger. Because that's what K2 taught me, was that 3 consecutive years, people were yelling failure all over me. And I was like, UN Women kept handing that flag back to me, saying, you're going to bring it to the top. And I was like, wow, okay. It's like you're not out until you give up. And I love that.
K2, even though it's the second highest mountain on Earth, it is known as the Savage Mountain. So I completely understand why you'd probably want to save that for last. Yeah, George Bell, a climber on a 1953 American expedition, told reporters, it's a savage mountain that tries to kill you. And so I had not really heard much about K2. No one, to me, obviously I've heard about Everest and that's like the mountain to climb. But now researching K2, for every 4 that summit K2, 1 dies. And you knew that going into climbing this mountain. Did you at any point think, okay, I've gone too far in this pivot of life? I've climbed all these mountains. Maybe this one, maybe I'll just save that one for later. What was that driving force that was like, no, I'm going to conquer K2, even if it keeps knocking me down on my ass. I'm going to get up there.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a slight difference between courage and bravery. It's like courage is when you know that you do something knowing the risks, despite the risks. And bravery, you don't really understand the risks and you just do it. So
which one were you?
Well, I knew the risks, more courageous. And I've seen the video where George Bell says that when he comes off in 53. It was an interesting time. He had a lot of frostbite when the reporters asked him that. And they had just lost Art Gilkey, one of their climbers that would go on to build the Gilkey Memorial, which now holds almost, less than 95 people who have died overall. It was a horrible, horrible climb, but they almost made it. The Americans really should have been the first to summit K2. They tried 3 consecutive years, 1938, 39, and 53. The year Everest was summited by Tenzing and Hillary, they were up there same year. And they heard the news that Everest was taken, and that's why there was so much pressure for the Americans to get K2, that what you're referring to took place. They were almost at the top. They only turned around because of the death of Art Gilkey and the frostbite of the teams.
How much of the success is physical and how much of it is mental? And how do you handle it when you're in the middle of a climb and they're at odds with each other?
It's a personal opinion based on how much is mental and how much is physical. I just talked to Peter Hillary, the son of Sir Edmund Hillary, and he was saying he thought it was much more mental than people would say it is. Like he'd say almost 90% mental. The problem is it looks so physical, right? You see all these people like in this gear and they're on that mountain and they, 1 step, 5 breaths, 1 step, 5 breaths. It just looks so physical. But the problem is you're not moving very fast. There's a few technical things, but you're mostly walking for the most part or hiking. Where it becomes more difficult is that you have to survive for a very, very long time in really terrible conditions. So this, minus 40, below zero, right? Fahrenheit. You've got the wind chill. Winds can go, I was just looking at the winds here, but the winds, this was 20 miles an hour up here today, but winds in normal can be 40, 50 just gushing at you with that wind chill factor is just unbearable. It is frostbite territory. You're hungry, you're thirsty, you're probably standing up there for 16 hours. It's just so miserable, and it's not human to do something that fights against survival like that. So most people have to push against the common sense side of you that says, what are you doing? You idiot, turn around. Mm-hmm. This isn't comfortable. This isn't nice. Do you want to die here? So the common sense side of you is really asking you, what are you doing?
So then after going through all this, talk to us about that epic life moment where you summit K2 and you become the first American and British woman to do so.
Yeah, so there's the Hollywood version, which is always more amazing than the normal life version. The Hollywood version.
Which feels like there's this epic photo of you like holding the flag up, and the triumph on your face is incredible. And I can imagine that photo embodies the Hollywood version
is awesome. And we always have to start with that. That's when you get up to the top and, there's like high fives, you got all the banners, there's a Bluebird Day, you've done it against the odds, and, cue the music, and, the angels are singing, and it's just everything that you worked so hard for, manifests itself. So that's great. The reality is you realize if you get up there, if you're lucky, there's no clouds and you can get a great view. You realize like, oh shit, I'm only halfway. Now, I want to ask you, like, in what sport do you ever celebrate something halfway? Like, would you celebrate and stop halfway on a marathon? Woohoo!
No, you never celebrate that you're ahead during halftime. Never.
It's almost like a curse, right? Like, and this is what the summit is. It's halfway, right? With 85% of this happening on descent. So it makes it, when you think of it that way, it's almost laughable, because it's like, oh my God, you can't really like cheer and celebrate yet because they're not down. And that is true to some extent. So yeah, so the reality is it's like, oh no, what do I have to do and get me out of here? And the problem why down is so much harder is, yes, it takes effort. Of course, you have to pick up your leg. You have to move it and you have to pull your weight up. That sounds awful. But the problem with going down is your gravity's pushing you. So if it's slippery, you're going to slip and fall. If it's steep, if it's, if you got a slope, if something, it's just so easy to make mistakes. Clipping, unclipping, you're trying to move fast. And it's just that whole gravity principle that's just asking you to make mistakes. Even if you put you got the spikes on your feet, but if you just push down more on your front toes, that can push you a little bit more forward leaning. It's really tough. I absolutely understand why the accidents happen on descent.
Which sounds a lot like in life when you've got a goal that you've set for yourself and you're like, okay, now I've done it. Or I'm here, I've arrived. But then it's like, oh my gosh, now I have to continue this. I have to sustain this. I have to, I've got the corner office now. I have to keep the corner office or hit this goal that I wrote down on my checklist and I did it. Now, what do I do next? I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of parallels in life of like what comes next and sustaining. Did you find that is a lesson that you were taught on a lot of these descents?
Yeah, there's a lot that happens on descent. In my mind, there was a really interesting descent on Everest where I get into a very interesting, because I'm so used to that line and the queue going up and there's only one way down. And so I'm expecting a fight because there's only one-way traffic and there's no rules of the road. There's no clear communications. There's no rules. There's nothing that says who goes up, who goes down, who has the right of way. More and more people on these routes. They all have different levels of experience. And then suddenly I'm with the first Sherpa that ever took me on my first peak, and I'm with his son, and I get into this very odd maternal instinct where it's like I have to save the son. He'd climbed Everest 8 times. This is all in my head, right? He's going to be saving me, not the other way around. But in my mind, I'm like, I must get the Sherpa down, right? Because I'm leading on the way down, and I just suddenly, and this is like a business thing, but I just got in my head transfer risk, because if people can't decide who gets what, it's because it's not clear who's getting or receiving what. And it's because you got oxygen stuff, you got goggles on, you got a headlamp. There's like no real estate. You can't communicate. Nobody can see each other. Everybody looks the same, right? So there's no way to talk.
Are you you're talking about how you guys are coming down and there's other teams coming up, correct? And there's a single path, single line that you're going on. And so it's almost like traffic without a stoplight, right? Where you don't know what team is able to come down and what team is able to come up. Am I getting that?
But sometimes it gets worse. Like if, I've seen grown men like come and start fighting, like pushing each other. And
oh my God,
for the right of way.
It's like, are you kidding? Like imagine.
It's like a Trader Joe's parking lot on a Sunday afternoon, except you're on the top of Everest.
Correct.
And you're not in cars.
-40.
Correct. Imagine like now you've got the testosterone like fueling and they're like now arguing over it. But I was like, you know what? It's better than that. Think about communications. What's going to make you, because I'm a level-headed person. I can argue both ways. I can argue the person coming up should get the step because they haven't summited yet and they're knackered. I can argue the people coming down should get the step because they're moving faster and they have gravity. I mean, you give me a side and I'll debate it. But forget all of that. Let's just use logic and let's use transfer of risk. So the one who takes the risk gets the step. So I'm just thinking, and I'm telling you, this happens so quickly. I didn't even think about it beforehand. I'm just thinking, save the Sherpa, right? And it dawns on me, because we can't communicate with the oxygen, with the huge goggles, with all this stuff on our heads, I had to signal. So we've got ropes. They're coming up, let's say, so their right hand's on their rope. I'm coming down, so my left hand's on the rope. So I would take my safety, my carabiner off the rope and stick it in front of their face. What does that say? I'm unclipped. I'm taking the risk. I'm taking the step. I've just made a very bold move. Unclipped, I'm taking the step. So I'm stepping down. Sherpa's got my back of my jacket. Every single person completely understood what this was. They grabbed my hand, fed me around their jacket, helped me clip onto the rope behind them. Every single person. When you see somebody hold a carabiner in front of your face, it says they're not clipped. They need to be clipped. How are you going to clip them? Well, if I'm coming down and you're coming up, then I got to get behind you. So they would feed it around their jacket.
And then how do you translate this into life in like a lesson that you kind of held onto that maybe our listeners can take away from this? Like communicating clearly when you know that you need the right of way or that you need help or you need someone to be part of your team, essentially.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think women in general are better communicators overall. Like, I think men would just barrel down. First of all, what I'm doing, everybody's doing anyway. What they're not doing is they're not stopping to show somebody why they're doing it and why they're taking the step. Because by doing that, I'm saying, I deserve the step, now help me. Everybody else is just doing it and they're barreling it down, but that seems aggressive. Like, why are you doing it when it could have been mine? All I was doing is saying why, so whether it's verbal or not verbal. And by the way, sometimes when you're working with people who don't speak the same languages, you can't always talk. So it doesn't matter whether we can talk or not talk. These are all different nationalities coming up. It's probably better that we don't talk.
Hey guys, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back in just a minute.
Look, staying healthy isn't easy. Watching your diet, hitting the gym, avoiding stress. But a good night's rest helps boost your overall health and wellness. And it couldn't be easier. The new Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed is the only bed that effortlessly adjusts and responds to both of you. The result? You wake up ready for anything. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. And now, the new Queen Sleep Number 360 P5 Smart Bed is only $17.99. Save $600. Only for a limited time. To learn more, go to sleepnumber.com.
KiwiCo believes in the power of kids. They want to kickstart curiosity, creation, and innovation in kids right here, right now. They believe that small lessons today can mean big world-changing ideas tomorrow. I have been such a fan of KiwiCo for such a long time, and I am so excited. They're sending Poppy a koala crate in the mail, and the koala crate is for her ages 2 to 4. She'll be 2 in a few months now, and I am so excited to do it with her. I don't know who's more excited, me or Poppy, but inside of it has lots of high-quality creative materials. And there's about 2 to 3 creative activities inside. There's an Imagine magazine where I can read her stories and we can play games together. There's also a lot of online DIY ideas. I cannot wait to spend some good quality mommy-daughter time. What I love so much about KiwiCo is it encourages our kids to tinker, innovate, and create. They'll discover the science behind hydraulics, build a walking robot, and see how high they can make a rocket fly. And everything's shipped right to your door, so there's no commitment. You can pause or cancel anytime. What's so nice is KiwiCo does the legwork for you, so you can spend more quality time together. There's no telling what a Kiwi kid can do. Kickstart curiosity, creation, and innovation in kids today and discover a brighter tomorrow. Get 30% off your first month plus free shipping on any crate with code CHALLENGED at kiwico.com. That's 30% off your first month at kiwico.com. Promo code CHALLENGED.
The newest vacuum and mop robot from Ecovacs is D-Bot N8+. It is an all-in-one cleaning robot that mops and vacuums simultaneously. Its powerful 2300 PA suction power extracts hard-to-reach dirt and dust from any floor, and the Osmo mopping system leaves hard floors sparkling while getting rid of 99.26% of bacteria. It uses advanced laser navigation and mapping to accurately map your home, creating efficient cleaning paths for thorough coverage with fewer missed and repeated spots. It comes with an auto-empty station to enjoy hands-free cleaning for months at a time. It is a dependable workhorse designed for busy households that need vigorous floor cleaning on a regular basis. Ecovacs D-Bot N8+, a reliable clean that fits your day. It is an all-in-one vacuum with Osmo mopping system. Unlike most brands of robotic cleaners that just vacuums, D-Bot N8+ has Osmo mopping system that allows simultaneous vacuuming and mopping and eliminates 99.26% of bacteria on the floor. It cleans more effectively with a powerful upgraded suction of 2300 PA to help you get rid of those hard-to-get and embedded dirt, dust, and debris on your floors. The new fan blade is made durable to withstand high-pressure suction while maintaining a low noise level. It cleans more efficiently with true mapping technology. Unlike other brands that vacuums your floor haphazardly or just does a back-and-forth cleaning pattern, D-Bot N8+ is smart enough to create efficient cleaning paths so that you get more coverage and you don't miss or repeat any spots. It uses true mapping technology that maps your home with 2 times more precision and 4 times more coverage compared to older generation of laser navigation. It provides the ultimate hands-free cleaning for months with auto-empty station. After cleaning, the robot goes into an auto-empty station, which empties into its dustbin. It has hypoallergenic disposable dust bags that holds up to months of dirt and debris. Buy D-Bot N8+ at ecovacs.com now. For a limited time, get a 10% discount using code DIRECT10.
You'll find your style at Signature Hardware.
They supply vanities, sinks, tubs, and hardware. Plus, they stock the classics, as well as the latest styles in sync with trends for 2021 that are welcoming, relaxed, and inspired by nature.
Signature Hardware has outstanding customer service to help guide you through the process. Take a look for yourself on their Instagram and Facebook pages to see what people are saying about them.
One of the things we're looking for in our kitchen is one of those big farmhouse sinks, and Signature Hardware had so many options and so many creative ways to style our kitchen. Directionally Challenged is sponsored by Signature Hardware. If you're looking for that perfect item to take your kitchen, bathroom, or house up a notch, head over to signaturehardware.com. We did, and picked out 8 furnishings that really stood out. They're unique and are 100% our style. See for yourself at signaturehardware.com/challenged. You'll be amazed at the variety and the quality.
And we're back.
for the sake of time, only because I want to make sure we get to you hitting the bottom of the Mariana Trench, you just have lived such a fascinating life. We could talk about just one of your accomplishments for a whole podcast episode. But so you conquer K2, which is the final mountain that you do on your third attempt. And at this point, you're not thinking, wow, I did it. Okay, I'm just going to put my feet up. You decide to now get into a submarine and go to our Earth's deepest point, the bottom of the Mariana Trench. And talk to us about that experience, what it's like to get down to that bottom sea level. And then to discover, we thought it was always flat, and now learning it's sloped. You've completely contributed to another environment.
The first thing that I want to say is if somebody feels like they shouldn't do something because it's already been done, don't think that way, because things are never the same. Everything was already climbed by the time I was born. If I really thought I should never go to these places, I would never do anything. So I go to these places thinking, what can I contribute that would be different than the people who have been there in the past? So always keep an open mind. Don't let previous places that have been visited make you think you can't go. Climate change alone makes it a reason to go. I first learned about the Mariana Trench by meeting the first person who had gone. And he was a great storyteller. And I thought, wow, of course, I remember 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and stuff like this. And, like books. And of course, all these seamounts, their stories and stuff like that. And, I loved scuba diving, water things. But I guess I never really appreciated how much the oceans were significant in our planet. You could look at the globe and say, okay, 71% is water, and you don't really ever think of it that way unless somebody really brings it to your attention. And if you look at climate change and you start double clicking on some of those indicators, you start to see that maybe 50% of NASA's leading indicators tend to be water related, which is pretty scary. So a lot of the climate change things that they look at are ocean related. And even when we talk about CO2, the oceans absorb up to 25% of the CO2. So they're actually a player even in helping absorbing carbon dioxide. When I first looked at it, the first person to go was in 1960. That submersible is a submersible. There were two people in that. It went one time, one way, and never worked again.
No.
And that was the U.S. Navy. 52 years later, the second submersible was created. It went down one time, one way, never worked again.
That's terrifying.
That was 2012, and that was James Cameron, the producer director, right?
Right.
So it sort of tells you that it's not easy to get these submersibles to go down and up and down and up in a repetitive way. So I probably ended every interview after K2 in 2017 by saying I wanted to go to Challenger Deep Mariana Trench. And people said, yeah, not really knowing what it was. But the point was there was no vehicle. I was saying I wanted to do something that didn't exist. And everybody said, yeah, fine. Have fun with that. But then in 2019, somebody built one that went down. And I was like, oh my God, it exists. A vehicle exists. I was so excited. But what was great about this is I knew him, meaning he had done the 7 summits and the North and South Pole. So I reached out and I said, you did it. Does it work? Can it go down twice?
But yeah, because so far it's only ever worked once, but you decide I'm just going to give it a go and maybe it'll work again.
Like, will you go down twice? And actually I knew his work more because he ended up doing like the 5 deeps. So he did not just the deepest, but he went and did these other deeps in other places. But his answer was no. He said no. He wasn't. Yeah, he was done. And I was like, I was so gutted. But then, so 2012 comes around, and of course the pandemic, which is awful for everybody. I got this message from a Canadian submariner, a retired dolphin, as they call themselves. And he said, you really should call this guy because I think he's going to go back. And I was like, wow, are you running intel? Like, who are you? This sort of guardian angel. And I did call, and he was right. And I don't think I would have received an outgoing call, but having placed an incoming call.
And this is your friend who you contacted originally to see if he would go, and he decided to go again.
He decided to go again because there was a question about some research that Cameron had done in 2012 versus some research he had. And there's only one person who could take the submersible down to prove who was right. Leave it to the men, the egos of men.
So do you take the same submersible down?
Yeah.
Wow.
Was there a moment where you're terrified, thinking these usually go once and never work again? Is there a moment it's not going to work while I'm in it, submerged thousands of feet deep?
So, I will tell you an obvious statement. Electricity and water do not mix. You know this from bathtubs. You know this from how old were we when you first heard that statement? It's absolutely true. But now you have a big, huge, well, not even huge, right? It's a 2-person sub, right? It is like sitting in a coach airplane seat side by side and just wrapping it in titanium. That's as big as this thing is. It does take 4 hours to go down, 4 hours to come up. And we did survey the bottom to look for whether it was flat like a billiard table or whether it sloped. And we did find that it sloped. The one thing that you can always say is something will always go wrong. Whether it's a mountain, whether it's the sea, whatever it is, and something does go wrong when we're at the bottom, and that's that the batteries on the starboard side fail.
I'm already sweating.
I know.
And so now they have something. You have to remember we're under 8 tons of pressure, so you can't even imagine what a TONS is. People say 292 jumbo jets. I think that's fantastic, but one jumbo jet would pretty much kill you, right? So you don't need the other 291.
So what are you thinking at this moment?
Well, interestingly enough, so they have something called watchdog, and watchdog is a noise that gets made every 15 minutes that you have to manually turn off. And it's there in case there's like the CO2 scrubbers don't work, or in case there's a transfer of gases. In other words, in case you were to pass out. And if you don't turn it off, it's sending a message to the machine saying, all right, the pilot and the mission specialist have died or are unconscious. And so it immediately sends the sub up. Now, after 4 hours, chances are you would no longer be alive because there would not be enough oxygen. But I will say this, when the batteries on the starboard side don't work, my first thing was not to panic. My first thing was to troubleshoot. And this is probably more of a left brain person. But the first thing I thought of is, can the batteries on the port side work on the starboard side? In other words, can we borrow battery power? Because I'm not an engineer, but I have been stuck with electronic simple things on mountains. Mm-hmm. So can I borrow battery power? And the pilot wasn't sure, but it's a good thought. The second is, if we turn it off, will it recharge? This is just logical thinking. I'm not doing anything.
Yeah, it's just like charging a car battery. Correct. It's like getting exactly.
If you turn it off, will it recharge? And was there some other function of, the battery stored power somewhere else to refuel it or something? Anyway, it turns out that even if you can get power in, the thruster, which is the little round motor that each side has, port and starboard, it needs full power to move the little motor on each side. So you can't. My third thing, which was quite clever, was because we wanted to head in one direction, was just to program 180 degrees so that we use the port engine to continue in that direction.
Yeah. So what did you end up doing?
It was toward the end of the 3 hours. That's actually, we should have been down there 4 hours. So that's why we came up in 3 hours. It should have been 4, 4, and 4. And it was
you
4,
were able
3,
to
and
still,
4.
so that it can still function and go up and move around with just half.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So we went up an hour earlier. But it's interesting that, there's never really panic. And I think part of that panic is because I'm just busy troubleshooting. I'm at ease with the risks. I'm never really afraid of something like that. I was more afraid jumping off the edge of the ship into, just the water. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that's way more dangerous to me because it was the Western Pacific Ocean, huge waves, and it was a big jump and stupid stuff like that. But the last thing I'll leave you with is just another philosophy, just for the readers, that I've also come upon just through the exploration is that I find that people tend to be afraid to take steps in certain directions, and they remain stuck where they are. But the reality is, by taking that step forward in whatever direction, you can find out whether you like that step or you don't like that step. It's important to at least take it and find out whether you like it or don't like it, because you can always go back, but you never know if you're going somewhere better unless you move forward. I like to think people all have invisible backpacks on them, and that's all the knowledge, skills, and experience they've acquired throughout life. And that allows them to pivot and take these steps and say, okay, I'm better. Don't like it, move this way. I just want them always to remember the safety net of the invisible backpack, because I feel that people sometimes remain trapped, and they don't need to remain trapped. They need to think about the invisible backpacks.
I love that so much. And I love that you've decided to encapsulate all of the philosophies that you've learned on all of your adventures in your book, To the Greatest Heights. I do have some really, I'm calling them ridiculous questions on exploring the world. If you don't mind if I just toss them your way, feel free to roll your eyes at me. But these are genuine questions I have, and you do not have to have long answers. You can just keep it simple.
Sorry, I can be Christine Columbus.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Okay, ridiculous questions on exploring the world. Do you use maps on your phone? Like, do you have like a map that you're using? How do you not get lost when you're climbing?
The reality is once you are on a mountain, the mountains, we climb on ridges. So I usually do that research beforehand. I'm not going to bother to take a map out on my phone and look at it, because I don't have my hand free for that. If I'm traveling on a glacier, I need my hands. Probably.
Oh man.
Because it's not easy climbing over something like a glacier, and I probably need both hands for that. But I will know roughly what the route is, and most of these routes, most of the mountains are pretty well laid out, and you're moving in a team. So follow the donkeys, follow the porters, follow there's plenty. If you can't see the path, it's pretty obvious where to go. Where I do tend to use these maps is more in local areas. Like if I want to go an hour north and I want like the best hiking trails.
Right.
And
okay, good. So yeah, you are normal and use some maps sometimes. That makes me feel better.
Okay. Any scary animal encounters? Like, do you carry bear spray around? Are there bears there? I would be worried about bears.
Definitely no bears at the bottom of the ocean.
You never know, Kayla. No one's been there before.
So animals are always more afraid of you, usually, than if you make noise and stuff like that. So always remember that. But the one place where we did have to carry flares and guns were the North Pole, was because as climate change comes in, the polar bears are struggling to find food, and they are heading more and more north and more unusual areas as their food source tends to wane over time. So that's the only time I've actually carried weapons or flares is the North Pole in the middle of the Arctic Ocean.
So bears, I was right. Bears, we should worry about them. I would be so stressed. Does the whole group all chained together have to like watch you pee, or when you have to go to the bathroom? If I go skiing, for instance, I get stressed all those layers that I have to take off, like just going to the bathroom. I can't imagine having to like be tethered to other people and be like, sorry guys, I got a 10-1, which on a set, if you're an actor, means that you have to pee and everyone knows about it. So do you guys have to do that on the mountain? Do you have pee stage fright? I'm already stressed thinking about it.
So it depends where on the mountain. Sometimes you are roped together, and it is hard to unrope. Good thing about, they do make devices for women, which is like a funnel with a tube. And what's nice about a funnel with a tube is you can store them in like a little plastic bag, put it in your pocket. It's fine. But what's nice is it gives you the convenience to stand. What you need to be able to do is at least unbuckle and get the zipper down so that you can get at least the first part around. And then actually, all you really have to do is turn your back. It's actually okay. And if you can hold it during break, because people are going to break every hour or two anyway to go get something to drink or eat or something like that, then you can, kind of at least, maybe take a little bit more rope and go somewhere else. But in most cases, you can manage.
Perfect. In case for my Fryman hikes, just really treacherous through like the neighborhoods of the Valley of California. So
because also
really strenuous.
Well, remember, you want those in your tent at night too, because you don't want to get up and leave your tent and put on clothes and shoes and all that stuff.
Right.
So,
because bears. Back to the bear fear. Yes, we've all seen The Aviator. You don't want to be Leonardo DiCaprio in The Aviator. Yeah. That's a lot of pee around a room and it just doesn't look good. And then just more like, how do you celebrate? Like when you actually do come down, do you have something that's just that you do for yourself, or somewhere you go, or what is, I know you mentioned like not combining like drinking with exercise, but do you maybe at that point have a glass of wine, or just like something, or dance to your favorite song? What do you do to celebrate after all these accomplishments?
Usually the first celebration is usually the base camp cook will somehow, and I have no idea how they pull this off, that they'll make a cake, which is amazing because you're on the site and it's like,
baking at altitude is like, how do they do that? I couldn't bake in Denver, Colorado.
Yeah, I have no idea how they pull this off, but there is always a congratulations cake waiting for you. And the skill that goes into that, I leaves me gobsmacked every time. So that's usually the first one. And that's, cake and soda. They'll find somebody will have brought all your brands of, soda or something. And then when you get into town, and then it depends always where you are, if you're in Nepal or Pakistan or, somewhere, you'll try to find, a restaurant. And yeah, people will we've had everything from Hard Rock cafes in Moscow to, to Japanese restaurants with sake, to champagne, to, you really do want to celebrate because it feels like, sometimes you've just, done.
Been on top of the world.
Yeah, exactly. Metaphor, right?
Yeah.
So for our final question, we wanted to ask you, how much of your success in life do you attribute to being on your own at age 16? That's such a young age, and I can imagine that's extremely difficult to have to learn to adapt to an environment. I mean, at that stage in life, and then obviously you have to adapt to all your environments as you're in such extreme measures.
That's a good question. I had somebody recently ask me, nature, nurture, which is almost another way of saying that. It's hard for me to put a number on that. The reason I find this hard to answer is I don't want somebody to feel that they didn't have a similar situation, they can't achieve great things. I think they can. I think the difference is that you really have to want it, and you have to know why you're doing something, and have a good philosophical perspective. If things don't succeed right away, that's the most important thing. If I had to write that over again, it's like, would I do it differently? It's like nobody ever says they would do things differently, which is interesting when asked those questions. And I think part of the reason for that is because they only know one thing, and that's that thing. It's like how you look back on it is how you're going to look at it going forward. You can have it be a bad situation and be ashamed, or you can have it be a good situation and say, okay, I'm at peace with that.
Vanessa O'Brien, thank you for joining us. For our listeners that want to follow you on social media, where can they find you?
Almost everything is at VOB online. So Victor Oscar Bravo online.
Love it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, and congratulations. We're so excited to see what adventures you go on next. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Great chatting to you guys.
Directionally Challenged. I was, during that conversation, typing out pieces of advice that I was already taking and mantras I want to hold on to. I love climb high, sleep low, because I have found myself a lot in trying to set new goals for myself, especially coming off of a year like 2020, being like, okay, you set a goal and it's going to be 10 steps forward, 9 steps back, 10 steps forward, 12 steps back, and then 10 steps forward, 5 steps back. But it just feels different. The idea of sleeping low and just kind of like resting, it's not like it's redefining this idea of failure. And instead of it's just part of the experience. It's part of the trajectory. It's part of the journey. It's part of the climb.
Right. That sleeping low is almost this time to replenish your body, to let it kind of refuel, whatever that means for you. And then you're fully prepared for when it's time to get back up and start climbing again. And you're right. It changes the mentality on this entire idea of the taking the steps backwards. It's not that you're going backwards in life. It's just that you're taking this respite and allowing your body to recoup so that you're ready again to tackle it. And yes, I just love how much I'm realizing how many parallels there are between climbing the mountain of life and climbing an actual mountain. And that's what Vanessa has really taught us today.
Also really responded to this idea, you don't fail unless you give up. And that, especially having two young women in our household at the age of, my stepdaughters are 18 and 15. And so I'm trying to be really mindful about, how I talk about my own goal setting and in a way, because I hear myself kind of talking to them. Or even the way that talking to friends like you and I talk about goal setting all the time, Kayla. And the way that I think that we talk to other people about, going after goals and accomplishing ideas and new things and exploring new territory. It's always very encouraging when it's about someone else. And then when the way we talk to ourselves about these things can be very like, well, I guess I failed. So that's it. And I love this idea. Like, no, unless you completely give up, you're not failing. It's been this new exploration of, what have I learned from this? And it's in the truest sense. And the fact that Vanessa was talking about, she didn't fail climbing Mount Everest the first time. It's, oh, nope, I learned a lot. So now I'm going to be ready the next time I do it. And I love kind of reframing this mindset of what that means. Kayla, did this conversation give you any sense of wanting to have a great adventure? Or is there something that you felt resonated with just even your own life or as a parent or as, a business person? Or what did you take away that you would want to apply to your life?
Well, I think I just realized that you can always pivot at any time in your life, that just because you've achieved a certain amount of success or decided to just take this one path for this part of your life, it doesn't mean you have to continue on it forever. You can always pivot. You can always decide like, hey, why don't I try this? Maybe I should do this instead. That you're never too old or too young to keep just kind of growing and changing direction and trying to figure it out. And again, it all comes back to what we talk about all the time. It's okay to not have it all figured out. It's okay. And Vanessa talked about once she let her ego go and she stopped acting like she knew it all. She had it figured out. She then decided to take this next step and pivot completely and look at everything she's accomplished. I respect her so much. Do I want to end up on the bottom of the ocean someday? Probably not. Yeah. But I'm going to take from her lessons and learn what I can from it. And who knows? You never know. Maybe at some point in life, I'll end up somewhere I never thought I'd be. Hopefully we all do.
Yeah. I love that she, said she was 47 when she got to the top of Everest the first time. It made me think of our conversation with Dr. Edith Eger, a Holocaust survivor who also is a psychologist, and everything that she's accomplished. If you have not heard this episode, it's a great episode. We really encourage you to go back and listen. But when she was going to continue on her education and get another degree, in psychology, she said, well, I don't know. I'm turning 50. I'm getting older. And then, someone who she respected in her industry said, well, you're going to be 50 either way. Might as well be a 50-year-old with an extra degree. And yeah, might as well be we're going to be in our 40s either way. Why not be in your 40s and have climbed to the top of Everest? It's definitely a reminder that, yeah, we talk about getting older and in our 30s all the time, and how that feels so much farther away from our 20s when it's like this land of opportunity. But actually, I feel like there's good stuff to be discovered at all ages, and we don't need to get caught up in the idea that it's too late. It's too late to go on that adventure. It's not.
It's never too late. It's never too late.